think about that, you realize, wow, the definition of a television spot, a radio spot, a print ad are all pretty simple. But now you look at that and you start to think about the definition of digital, and it gets pretty complex. You've got stuff that is entertainment, and we still need pure entertainment. Why? Because that's the way in which we generate awareness and buzz and attention and cultural impact. We need information, right? Because consumers now access content and brands primarily and initially through search. So we need websites, we need to be present on the web, we need social, we need all of that kind of stuff. And then, lastly, we need real utility, because in the social digital space, our products are not always our product. Something like that Garmin Connect might be utility. There's also an expectation that we're going to offer something of value and meaningful, and since we have to also earn attention, an interruptive message isn't going to be as effective as utility. Here's another way of looking at things which I think is interesting. When you look across the digital landscape, you could design this a lot of ways. I designed it 4 ways. I said, okay, you know what? You've got short-term and long-term things, and you have entertaining and you have useful. Ad agencies, and I use that loosely because more of us are in that business than we're probably from companies like, the Huges and whatnot, RGAs, they probably don't need to be here. We tend to start in that lower left-hand corner, right? We're going to do something cool and fun and entertaining. We have our campaign mindset on, and its purpose is to get attention and a little bit of involvement and engagement, but it's usually short-lived. And it's usually not really about utility. It's really about trying to get somebody to pay attention to us. What I think we all need to do is we need to go up, we need to go to the right, and we need to go to the upper right. And if you go up, you end up with something like we did this cool thing for Olympus. It was augmented reality, demonstrated a camera with a marker, but it wasn't just augmented reality for the sake of it. It was like, we're really going to demonstrate this camera. Every feature, every button, every lens, every filter, you're going to be able to do with a marker in front of your consumer. Short-lived, but incredibly useful, and something that ended up driving, a tremendous amount of sales. On the bottom right, if you haven't seen this, and I don't know if Tim will talk about this a little bit, is this very cool thing made by Many Did for Burberry called Art of the Trench. You should take a look at that if you haven't. artofthetrench.com. It's a very awesome site that celebrates trench coats, but invites participation and has gotten huge numbers of people who play with it, tweet about it, upload their own photographs, like other people's photographs, pass them around the web, etc. Uses the network effect in a small way. Entertaining, less than informative, but long term. That thing keeps living and living and living, and I know that those guys have plans, for keeping it alive. And then finally, the upper right would be that Garmin Connect. Incredibly useful, incredibly long term, something that not only serves an existing customer, but then can be turned into an incentive for a prospective customer. I'm going to make that product first, then I'll advertise it, and then I'll attract people. But you look at this and you go, wow, that's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of stuff. I'm going to go learn something about making digital work when it covers that broad a spectrum, and my job is what? A creative director or a writer or a planner or a strategist or whatever. Shit, how do I even think across all that? Well, it was interesting. At South by Southwest last year, everything I sat through, I came to the same conclusion, that they all had the same ingredients. So I met the guys from Smool who do all these cool apps like Ocarina and the lighter. Anyone use this app, the little lighter flame? And what's cool about it is you light it and you can see across the entire world, everybody else in the world who has their lighter lit at the same time. We like that for some reason, I don't know why. But or you look at, iPhone ads. That have a whole new degree of application built into them. Or you look at things like this. This is a cool little thing that Diesel did. You come out of a dressing room, you go up to the mirror, you connect to your Facebook page right away. Your friends can look at you in your jeans, see if your ass looks too big, whether you look good, they can comment right away. You can actually tap into your social community to decide whether or not you should buy the jeans. I mentioned Out of the Trench. And I don't know if you saw this thing. The Antwerp Zoo was going to have a baby elephant. Well, an elephant in the Antwerp Zoo was going to have a baby elephant. And instead of just saying, "Hey, we're going to have a baby elephant," they put up the what is it called? I always call it ultrasound. They put up the ultrasound. They showed everybody the progress of the baby elephant. They crowdsourced the name. They got the entire country involved with paying attention, sharing the updates, deciding on the name of the baby elephant. They hardly spent any advertising. They did a little bit of outdoor. attendance at the zoo went up by like 300,000 people, in the course of a year because they did this thing. It wasn't advertising as much as it was this thing that embraced everybody. And then there's the whole Jay-Z decoder thing, which I'm sure you guys saw. And then there's even this, the crazy T-Mobile YouTube, video that plays off the dancing, wedding dance thing, right? So you look across all of those things, they have something in common. They're experiences, they invite participation. They're defined as much by the user as by the brand. Sharing is essential. It's built in to every single one of these things. They leverage community, and the content and utility is the product. I think that's really interesting. Brands have to think when they go into the digital and social space, my product's not my product. My content that I put into the space is my product. So anyway, here's what I think we should think about changing ourselves and inside our companies going forward to do more of this kind of stuff and think more this way. And this isn't across every single case or every single encounter, but an awful lot. Let's stop thinking about targeting audiences with messages, media plans, and penetrating a market. Let's think in terms about we're actually building a community. We're going to make experiences, not messages. We're going to express an invitation as opposed to targeting people, right? Because we want them to be part of this, not a recipient of a message. We want an interest plan. Right? Media plans are so weird. They start January 1st, they end March 31st, but somebody wants to learn about us in April or May, and the media is done running. I think we need to rethink how we let people engage with us. And then finally, a lot more collaboration. We're going to talk about that tomorrow with John Windsor, who is sort of reinventing the whole agency model with victors and spoils and this whole sense of mesh and sharing, et cetera. Another thought is user engagement and user experience and engagement need to be as much a part of anything as the new art and copy. Someone criticized me for this being a real simplification of how to get ourselves to be digital, but if every idea we think is art and copy, then the first step at least, let's not think about that, let's think about user engagement and design. And there's this really interesting comment on my blog last week about someone who said that this was what he thought was the single deterrent inside every great agency that he'd ever worked at, their inability to get digital more quickly, was that they couldn't think about the value of making stuff that were filtered that way. So I think when it comes to strategy, and Gareth will talk a lot more about this tomorrow, that we go from our classic stuff, who's our target, what's our insight, our message, how are we going to reach them, how will we measure success. We write these things that are designed to create an ad campaign, and maybe we should move to, again, who's the community, where do they hang out. You don't have to write this stuff down, it's all on SlideShare already, and it will be. Everybody's decks will be on SlideShare. And you can take them and copy them and use them and change the typeface in them and then make believe it's your own content and present it internally at your company, because we all share our stuff, it's fine. What value can we add, right? That's back to the Garmin thing. What's our content going to be? Not our product, but the content that's going to be something that people want to engage with. How people are going to get involved? What platforms and APIs are we going to use? What's going to make it ongoing? Again, I think one of the things we have to get out of our mindset are campaigns have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and they're done and they're over. This stuff doesn't end. If you look at software companies, their product. I had a really interesting thing with Google last week, the +1 button. Everyone know the +1 button? New social thing, right? You know what you have to do to go through to get the +1 button? You got to log into your Google account. You got to go to the experiment page. You got to opt out of any other experiments that they're in. You got to opt into the +1 experiment, and then how many people even know about that? And this is launched as Google's biggest thing in social. But what you realize is, they're a software company. They're iterating. They're putting things out there before they're totally ready. It's sort of like, I think I just learned this term this morning, permanent beta. And we think everything has to be completely done and finished, et cetera, and we're not going to show it to anybody until it's ready, and then it's going to go out into the marketplace and boom. Just another way of really thinking. I think we should all take these 4 words and put them on our cubicle wall, or our creative director room wall, or our war room, et cetera. Just very simple, interactive, shareable, participatory, ongoing. And take any piece of work we ever think up, any idea, and hold it up to those 4 words and ask ourselves, is what we just came up with fit those things? Because if it doesn't, it may be fine, but let's go and make sure we build an element of the program that is all of those things. I think we have to rethink the teams we work with. Copywriter, art director is pretty traditional, but I think we got to put ourselves in a room with a designer and a UX and a tech person and a mobile person. We got to learn how to work with them. It is challenging. It's like clinking glasses. 2 people is really easy to make a toast. 6 people, that's a lot of clinks. to get agreement, and if a clink equal an agreement, that you get the sense of what that's like, but we've got to learn how to do that. I think Matt might talk a little bit about the demise or the death of the account executive or something like that, but you probably heard the expression the T-shaped person. I think every one of you has to think in your mind, I need to be a T-shaped person. So what's a T-shaped person, right? Well, you've got this vertical axis, which is all of these specific skills and disciplines, right? And the top of that thing is the T. And what that basically means is you need to have some particular skill, but you also better be really, really, really good at understanding every single one of these roles, how I can help make them better, how I should interpret their comments and influence on the work, how do I incorporate them into a project? It still stuns me sometimes when I see account people who they don't even know what a UX person is, or IA, or what is the process by which digital work gets done, and you hit yourself and they're going, I can't believe this, we're like in the 2011s, and how can there be people who don't know that kind of stuff? And so the only thing I know how to do is suggest that we do it on our own, right? Like, oh yeah, I know what that person does and the role that they play and when and why I need them, and I'm going to be good at something, but I'm going to have this, this view across the top. I refer to this a little bit. We need to change the process by which we do things. And again, other people know more about this than I do, and they'll do a good job explaining it. But we got to be less linear and more iterative in how we do things, and not be so afraid of being able to put work into the marketplace or bring it to a client or stick it on the web and hide in public before things are totally ready, because we may get them to a much better place by doing that. You're going to try to jumpstart your organization somehow. I don't know how much influence you have or how senior some of you guys are, but here's some of the things that I learned in trying to do this over the last couple of years. You can't do it unless you have all these 5 things. You have to have pressure from the top. So if you're not the top guy, you got to go convince the top guy or top woman that we've got to make some of these things, and here's why. Because if no one's going to listen to you as much as they're going to listen to the boss, right? You need buy-in from everybody, so it can't be something that you're trying to force down people's throats. You got to find a way of enticing them, inviting them, all the things we just talked about earlier, same kind of stuff, so that they feel like they have a say in it and they can help shape it and they can learn from it and it's not threatening to them. You need commitment of resources. You can't do this without actual change, whether it's training, sending people to stuff like this, hiring new people, making an investment in certain talent. It just isn't going to happen. You need some actionable steps. Like, you can't just say, hey, we're going to do this and hope that it happens. You have to say, here's the first thing we're going to do. And inside Mullen, what we did, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a new mantra, and that mantra is going to be unbound. And the second thing we're going to do is we're going to change our space, and we're going to smush people together. And the third thing we're going to do is we're going to put tech inside the creative department. And the fourth thing we're going to do is we're going to put mobile and connection planning inside the creative department. And the fifth thing we're going to do, and we said, these are things we're actually going to do, because if we don't, nothing's going to work. And then you've got to have some way of measuring it, right? And the one thing that we haven't done, and I haven't talked about, but I think people should actually think about, is you should restructure compensation models inside your company to reflect this. So profit sharing, raises, stuff like that, I believe, and we haven't done it at my agency, but I believe should be tied to, not to individual performance, but to team performance. It should be tied to not how well you do the one job you have today, but how quickly you learn a second job on that, on that T thing. That's as hard as changing procurement officers and how they buy services from our companies. But I'm old enough now and been doing this long enough that I can say this shit. I can say whatever I want because people can't hurt me. But I think that you should go home and change your incentive compensation structures. Here's what I think you should do as an individual. And again, I feel confident in saying this because it's worked for me. Find new sources of content. Stop reading the same old ad trades. Stop looking at the same old YouTube videos. If you are not really, really active on Twitter, get your ass on Twitter and then get deeply embedded in it. Same thing with Instagram. Same thing with, if there's 2 or 3 or 4 blogs that you read, and I would definitely be reading, besides mine, I'd be reading Made by Many, I'd be reading BBH Labs, I'd be reading Gareth Kay, and comment on those things. Take from them, learn from them, drive stimulation, interaction. Learn something about APIs. I mean, God, I hardly know anything about this stuff, and I knew nothing about it a year or two ago, but I'm surrounded by people who know less than I do in some cases, and the things that you can make in an event just by realizing what you can plug together in the form of Legos is actually pretty amazing. partner with somebody different. You know, we get